A trigger in Adobe Character Animator CC is simply a way to show or hide a group or layer. If I want this robot to have a heart animation appear on his screen, clink his claws together, or even open up his entire face to reveal a hidden computer screen, this is all done through triggers. Open the example Triggers Beginner Lesson Character Animator project file, and in the project panel, double-click Scene 1 Basic Triggers. This should open the scene in record mode. Let's experiment with these simple triggers first, and then we'll show how they were made. Press the 1 key on your keyboard and a yellow light appears in the top circle. Let go and it disappears again. Press the 2 key and a blue circle appears below. But when you let go of the key, the blue circle remains. Tapping the key again turns it back off. In the third example, pressing the 3 key makes 3 separate circles appear. And finally, in the fourth example, pressing 4, 5, or 6 changes the hand to a different position. Let's see how these were set up. In the project panel, double-click Puppet 1 Basic Triggers. This will open the artwork up in rig mode. In the lower left, you should see the Triggers panel with the triggers that make this scene work already listed. If you see the History panel instead, just click the Triggers header to switch over to it. To build the triggers from scratch ourselves, let's remove the existing ones by selecting them all with Command+A on Mac or Control+A on Windows and pressing Delete. In the Puppet panel, if I toggle the visibility of the yellow light layer by clicking the left eyeball icon, I can see a yellow circle appear. If we wanted this to be invisible by default and only show up when we press a trigger, we can just drag the layer into the Triggers panel, which creates a new trigger associated with that layer. If we click the keyboard column in the Triggers panel, type a 1, and press Return, now pressing the 1 key on the keyboard will activate that trigger. We can try this out by returning to record mode by clicking it in the top workspace bar. And as expected, it works. When we press 1, the yellow circle appears, and when we let go, it disappears. Let's click on Rig in the top workspace bar to return to our trigger setup. Now we'll do the same thing with the blue light layer. Drag the layer into the blank space of the Triggers panel, and another trigger is made. Then click the keyboard column and type in a 2. Finally, let's check Latch in the trigger properties that show below. Note that latch keys show with a filled background in the keyboard column to help differentiate them. Return to record mode. Tapping the 2 key here will keep the trigger on, not make it go away like the first trigger did. This is called latching, and you can think of it like flicking a light switch on or off. Making a trigger latched or unlatched is really a personal preference, so see what works best for your own puppets and performance style. Returning to rig mode, now we have 3 separate layers, green light, orange light, and red light, that we want to have appear in a single trigger. To do this, drag the green light layer into the blank space of the Triggers panel to create another new trigger. While it's selected, press Return to rename it. I'm going to call it 3 lights, and press Return. Then I'll type in a 3 in the keyboard column and check Latch below. Now try dragging the orange light layer in the Puppet panel on top of the 3 lights trigger in the Triggers panel, and you'll see it get added into the layers list below. So a trigger can have as many layers as you want associated with it. Let's add the last layer by dragging the red light layer on top of the 3 lights trigger and verify that it's been added to the list below. Now if we return to record mode and try pressing the 3 key, we can see that all 3 circle layers are showing up at the same time. Return to rig mode, twirl open the arm group, and then twirl open the hands group inside. Sometimes when you trigger one thing, you want to replace other things and have them disappear, so only one piece of artwork shows up at a time. Hands are a common example of this. If you trigger a finger pointing, you only want to see that, not the other 3 positions. In Character Animator, this is called a swap set. To create a new swap set, begin to drag the entire hands group over the Triggers panel. As you do this, you'll notice a drop zone appear in the bottom, asking if you want to make this into a single trigger or a swap set. This shows up anytime you drag a group into the Triggers panel. If we made this a trigger, it would simply show and hide the whole group, just like the circles previously. Instead, we'll drag over Create Swap Set. Now we have a group in our Triggers panel that includes its layers as separate triggers. In a swap set, whichever trigger has the filled-in finger icon will be the default, the first thing you'll see when the scene loads. You can easily change this by clicking another finger within the swap set, but we'll stick to keeping it on the default trigger for now. Next, we can enter keys for each other trigger. I'm going to use 4 for point, 5 for piece, and 6 for palm swap. Note that we didn't add a key to the default, and that's because it will automatically get triggered when another trigger ends. Back in record mode, we can see that pressing 4, 5, or 6 changes the hand position by swapping one piece of artwork at a time. Here are a few final helpful hints. First, there are actually 4 ways to create triggers: dragging and dropping into the triggers panel, clicking the plus icon to make a blank trigger, and then dragging artwork into it, clicking the triggers column next to a group or layer, or right-clicking any group or layer to get several trigger creation options. Second, you can easily consolidate triggers by dragging them on top of each other. So if I wanted the blue circle trigger to also trigger the yellow circle, I could simply drag the yellow trigger on top of the blue one, and the layer contents are combined below. You can also drag triggers around to reorganize them or take them in or out of swap sets. Finally, clicking a layer in the triggers panel will highlight it in the puppet panel, and clicking the finger icon in the puppet panel will highlight the trigger it's associated with. If a group or layer is connected to more than one trigger, it will get a small arrow next to the trigger icon, and clicking it will allow you to select one of its multiple triggers. Those are the fundamentals of using triggers in Character Animator. In any puppet you download, you can take a look at how they set up their triggers panel. Triggers help add emotion, expressiveness, and an element of surprise to your characters, so try experimenting with them and watch your creations come to life in new ways. In Adobe Character Animator CC, when a group added to a trigger has a behavior associated with it, that behavior also gets triggered, giving you several ways to greatly expand the expressive possibilities of your characters. Open the example Triggers Beginner Lesson Character Animator project file, and in the project panel, double-click Scene 2 Triggering Behaviors. This should open up the scene in record mode. We'll play with these examples first and then make them for ourselves afterwards. Pressing the 1 key shows a short explosion trigger, and 2 reveals a looping fireball animation. Both of these have the cycle layers behavior associated with them, which allows you to build on-demand frame-by-frame animation. Pressing 3 fades a green circle in and out, because a fader behavior has been added to this group. Pressing 4 causes a chicken to fall from the sky and bounce on the ground. You can also drag and throw him around with the mouse or fingers on a touch-enabled display. This shows that artwork and physics tags can also be triggered to drop into place and be subject to the laws of gravity, and bump into any other collidable objects. Pressing 5 shows a multi-part cycle layers animation. At first, the animation pauses when the stem grows, but pressing 5 again will complete the cycle and make the flower bloom. Pressing 5 again a couple of times will reverse the process. This is an example of pause layers, which are tagged to pause a frame-by-frame animation midstream. Finally, pressing 6 makes the character raise his right arm, and another press lowers it. This also uses the cycle layers behavior, and triggering poses like this is a common technique. In the project panel, double-click Puppet 2, Triggering Behaviors, to open it in rig mode. To start building the triggers panel from scratch, let's remove the existing triggers by selecting them all with Command+A on Mac or Control+A on Windows and pressing Delete. Let's take a closer look at the explosion and fireball groups. Each is a sequence of layers, one for every frame of the animation. In the behavior column, we can see that each of these groups has a behavior associated with it. If I select the explosion group and scroll down the properties on the right, I can see it has a cycle layers behavior, which was originally added by clicking the plus button. The parameters below inform us how this sequence of layers is going to react. They'll start when triggered, go in order from the bottom to the top, advance every one frame, and only cycle one time. And that makes sense for an explosion animation. We just want it to happen once and disappear. We also want to make sure that on trigger end is set to let cycle finish. Otherwise, the animation might stop mid-explosion if we stop the trigger early. If we select the fireball group and view its cycle layers behavior, it's pretty similar, except this one moves from the top to the bottom and is a looping animation, so cycle is set to continuously. To create a new trigger for the explosion, drag the group into the triggers panel and release it over the Create Trigger area. Then do the same thing for the fireball group. Add a 1 and 2 in the keyboard column to trigger these. Moving on, let's select the green light group, which we can see has a fader behavior associated with it, with a duration of 3 seconds. We can do the same thing as before to make this fade in and out on demand. Drag the group into the Create Trigger area. I'll set this key to 3 and also check Latch below, so I don't have to keep holding the key down to see the full fade effect. If I select the chicken group and view the right properties, I can see that he's been tagged with the Collide, Dynamic, and Draggable tags, and a physics behavior has been added to him. I'll make sure Start is set to When Triggered so he doesn't fall immediately, and Bounce Off Scene Sides is checked so he'll respond to the edges of the scene instead of falling off into a bottomless abyss. Again, to make the trigger, I'll drag the chicken group into the Create Trigger area, assign a 4 key to it, and check Latch. The final 2 groups, Flower and Arm Raise, each has a Cycle Layers behavior just like the Explosion and Fireball did previously. There are a few small differences. The flower has 2 layers in its sequence tagged as Cycle Pause, meaning when the sequence reaches those layers, it will pause until triggered again, allowing the animation to play out in smaller parts instead of all at once. The group's Cycle Layers behavior also has forward and reverse checked, so it will move in the opposite direction when it reaches the end of the cycle. I'll drag the flower group into the Create Trigger area and assign a 5 key to it. The Arm Raise group is an example of a common character animation technique, animating in and out of a specific pose. Because forward and reverse and hold on last layer are both checked, this trigger will play the animation and hold on the last pose, in this case a raised hand, and then reverse when triggered again. To create my final trigger, I'll drag the Arm Raise group into the Create Trigger area, assign a 6 key to it, and check Latch below. If I return to record mode, now I should see each of the triggers work as expected when I press the 1 through 6 keys. So adding behaviors to triggered groups opens up a lot of fun possibilities, from frame-by-frame animated sequences to falling chickens. Try experimenting with these in your own creations and see what extra actions you can add to your characters. One of the most common areas to add triggers into your creations with Adobe Character Animator CC is a character's face. Even just a few simple triggers can greatly expand the emotional range of your puppets. Open the example Triggers Beginner Lesson Character Animator project file, and in the project panel, double-click Scene 3 Face Triggers. This should open the scene in record mode. If your webcam and microphone are on in the upper right corner, you should immediately see the character following your movements and lip-syncing with your voice. If you press the 1 through 9 keys, you'll see the face react in a variety of ways. 1 does a simple blink, while 2 animates a blink over several frames. 3 makes the eyes look happy, and 4 reveals a half-lowered eyelid. 5 replaces the mouth with a confused squiggle. 6 replaces the entire upward curving happier mouth set with a sadder-looking downward curving set. Finally, 7 and 8 add props to the face, with 8 also triggering a poof animation as a transitional element. Double-click Puppet 3 Face Triggers to open it up in rig mode. To start building the triggers from scratch, remove the existing ones by selecting them all with Command+A on Mac or Control+A on Windows and pressing Delete. Let's start with the blinks. The left and right eye groups each have a layer tagged as left or right blink, meaning when you blink in the webcam, the character will blink as well. But sometimes you may want a little more manual control over a blink, which is where triggers come in. The blink actually replaces other eye elements like the pupil and eyeball, so I'm going to make a new swap set by clicking the plus button in the Triggers panel, selecting Create Swap Set, and pressing Enter to rename it to Blink. Now I'll press plus and select Create Trigger, and then do it one more time to create 2 trigger states inside the swap set. I'll rename them to Blink On and Blink Off, making Blink Off the default by clicking the finger icon next to it, and entering a 1 key for Blink On. Now I can drag in the appropriate layers for each trigger. For Blink On, I'll drag the left blink and right blink layers on top of it, which I'll see get added to the trigger in the layers list below. Then for Blink Off, I'll drag in all the parts I want the blink to replace, which includes each eye's lids group, pupil group, and eyeball layer. I can select them all at once by holding down Command on Mac or Control on Windows while selecting each one, and drag them all over together, once for the left eye and again for the right eye. This should add 6 elements to the layers list below. If you can't see them all, just drag the divider line up a little bit. The next few triggers are a little easier to set up. The animated blink actually doesn't replace anything, it just covers up the eyes, because we still want to see the eyeball and pupil behind the lids as they open and close. So I can drag in the left eye's animated blink group over the Create Trigger drop zone, and then drag the right eye's animated blink over top of the newly formed trigger to add it. Finally, I'll enter 2 for the keyboard trigger. The lids group in each eye has a happy and half open state, which I can set up in the same way. Drag one layer into the triggers panel to make a new trigger with it, and then drag the other layer over top of it to trigger both lids at the same time. Now, you could have these all as separate triggers and assign them the same key, and it would still work, but I'd recommend consolidating your triggers whenever possible. You can always drag one trigger into another one to combine them. So when I'm done, I should now have new happy and half triggers, each with 2 layers in their list below and assigned to the 3 and 4 keys. For the mouth, we need a swap set to determine which mouth or set of mouths to show at any given time. So I'll click the plus icon to create a new swap set and call it mouths. First, we'll drag the main mouth group into the new swap set and click the finger icon to set it as our default. Then in the alternatives group, we can shift select confused and sad set and drag those into the swap set as well. But we have one more step, and that's to also drag the alternates group itself into these last 2 triggers. Sometimes other behaviors can override your triggers. In this case, the lip sync behavior can cause the normal mouth group to show up when you're talking. So this just ensures that this entire alternate group will replace the normal mouth group, resolving any potential conflicts. To finish out the swap set, I'll give a 5 key to confused and a 6 to sad set, and make them both latched. Finally, let's add the prop triggers. I can drag the beard layer in first, add the 7 key to my newly formed trigger, check latch, and then drag the mustache group in as well, so everything gets triggered together. I can drag the shades layer in, give it the 8 key, and check latch to add sunglasses to my puppet. But I also want the poof transitional animation to play when they come on or off. So in this case, I don't actually want to add the poof to this trigger because I need it to play when the trigger shows and hides. Instead, I'll drag the poof cycle layers group into the create trigger area, also giving it the 8 key, but keeping latch unchecked. If I return to record mode, now I have an expressive, dynamic face thanks to these new triggers. Even simple and subtle triggers for the eyes and mouth can have dramatic effects. Any artwork can be triggered at any time, so the possibilities are endless, and you can do whatever fits your own character and style. Try experimenting with these triggers in your own creations, and have fun.